welcome to the X22 Report. My name is Dave, and this is episode 114. And the title of this episode is In the Dark of the Night, the Government Prepares for the Economic Collapse. And as we know, President Obama has been giving speeches on the bankruptcy of Detroit. He's been talking about Zimmerman. It could have been him 35 years ago. But there are many other things happening in the world. And just like in the Great Depression leading up to World War II, a lot of people didn't realize what was happening. They didn't realize that all these countries and everyone was maneuvering for the war that was coming. And the same thing is happening right now. Everyone is moving assets. Everyone is positioning themselves. And this is all for the eventual war. Plus, the government is preparing for this collapse. And the first part of this collapse will be coming around this fall. There was an article that came out that believes that the Fed will do some type of tapering or some type of cutbacks, and we'll discuss that at the end of this report. But right now, let's get into the economic collapse news. And as we know, Detroit, filed bankruptcy. And we knew this was coming. This is not a surprise. I reported this on a couple episodes back where the new person who was heading up and overseeing Detroit, all the financial matters, he's always said that he was going to try not to declare bankruptcy. But again, always when these people say this, it's always the opposite, and they eventually went into bankruptcy because when you have so much debt and you can't pay bills, you can't do things, you have no choice but to do this. But we're seeing other cities that are having the same type of problems, like Chicago. Moody's recently just downgraded their ratings, and what it says here, Chicago had its bond rating downgraded by Moody's Investor Services. So, we're going to see this throughout the cities, and this is why I've said this in my past episodes. Chicago, New York, let's say Illinois, New York, California, Colorado, Connecticut, New Jersey, Maryland, these huge populated areas with big cities are in a lot of debt right now. And they are struggling, just like Detroit, and they're on the verge of collapse also. And this is why you see in the major cities these mayors creating these draconian laws, these gun bill laws, like in New York City, the stop and we don't have to ask any permission to frisk you type of law, and report on your neighbor. We'll give you $500, and we'll research if they have a legal or illegal gun. All these things are done because they're in high populated areas, and they know what is coming. They know what's going on, but again, they're not reporting it to the public. That's the only difference. Now, there was a push to push Glass-Steagall and reinstate it because it was repealed in 1999, and this is what caused all of these problems, that banks were allowed to speculate and to combine people's deposits and invest them in things like the subprime mortgage-backed securities, and they were trying to reinstate it, but the banks are too powerful, the Fed is too powerful, and it didn't go anywhere. So we're on a train to nowhere right now, and we're just going to fall off the cliff because there's nothing stopping this. That's really what's happening. Now, Obama to Detroit, there were a couple congressmen saying you need to help, and I know Obama came out and said, we're not going to let Detroit go into bankruptcy, but I don't think there's a lot of words there, but again, I don't care what these people say. I look at their actions, and you can always tell the true nature of a person by their actions and not what they say, because a lot of people say a lot of things, and Obama likes to talk a lot, and there was no way that he can bail this out the United States is in so much debt, and because of the sequester, and he keeps telling people, you can't have fireworks because of the sequester, we can't do this because of the sequester. How is he going to make the case to bail out Detroit at this point? Plus, the United States government is exactly like Detroit. They have so much debt, the tax revenues aren't covering the interest payments of the national debt. They are barely scraping by. They're coming up with new tax laws to track down where everyone has their money so they can generate more revenue. And this is the last attempt of a dying government. This is what happens. And right now, Detroit, it's done. It's bankrupt. And, there's nothing that the U.S. government at this point can do. I mean, of course, they can always say, you know what, we'll print more money out of thin air. I mean, the Fed will print more money out of thin air. They'll loan it to the government, and they can always give that money to Detroit. But how long do you think that's going to last? Again, without the income, without the jobs, without the manufacturing, just like Greece, just like Cyprus, debt upon debt upon debt upon debt, yeah, you might be able to kick the can down the street a little bit longer, but you end up in the same place. And I put on the x22report.com site a little graph, and this is from Zero Hedge, of it pretty much sums up all the problems of Detroit. And if you look at this, back in 1950, the population was like 1.8 million. In 2011, it was around 700,000. Manufacturing jobs back in the 50s was roughly around 300,000, and now it's around 27,000. So, we can see when you pile debt upon debt upon debt, and you have no jobs, you have no manufacturing, you have no people living there, you go, one thing can only turn out of this, and that's bankruptcy, and that's what we're seeing. Now, these are the 12 things that will happen next in the Detroit bankruptcy. Alice Batchelder, Chief Judge of the U.S. Sixth Circuit Court of Appeals, will appoint a bankruptcy judge to oversee the city's case. The bankruptcy judge will determine where to hold hearings, which could take place in Detroit, Kentucky, Ohio, or Tennessee. An automatic stay will be issued on most of Detroit's bills, including unsecured debts. The city will continue to pay secured creditors, including water and sewer bondholders, who have the right to seize city assets if Detroit fails to pay. An automatic stay also will be issued on lawsuits against the city, including outside challenges by pension officials and union members. The city doesn't need approval to continue services. For example, the police, fire, water, sewer, and public works are completely unaffected by the bankruptcy filing for now and will operate as usual. However, cuts are possible in the future, and when they say possible, that's coming. Creditors likely can challenge the city's right to file bankruptcy by issuing motions to dismiss the case. In this case, bondholders and pension officials could accuse the city of failing to negotiate in good faith, one of the key criteria allowing the city to file for bankruptcy. The city also will have to prove it is insolvent, another stipulation required to file for Chapter 9 bankruptcy. According to the Federal Bankruptcy Code, this requires the city to prove that it is not paying its bills. If the judge authorizes the city to move forward with Chapter 9 bankruptcy case or would propose a plan of reorganization, this could take weeks, months, or years, all depending on how everything goes. The city will attempt to win support for the reorganization plan from creditors, including secured bondholders, general obligation bondholders, unions, and pension boards. So that's what is going to happen with the city of Detroit. All right, let's move on here. Now, like I said, there are many things that are happening around the world, especially in Syria, Egypt, Europe, and right here, the first U.S. land-based ballistic missile defense base in Europe is to be constructed in Romania by KBR. And the construction contract to build a facility at Romania's, I'm going to try to pronounce this, Devesalu Air Base was issued to the Texas headquartered company by the U.S. Army Corps of Engineers, Europe District, and is worth $134 million. So we see already that missile bases are being established in Romania, which is right around the area of right next to Russia, the Ukraine, and this is another key area. Now, Russia is looking to move into Cyprus air and naval bases. And what they're looking to do here is they're looking to put their ships and their air force in Cyprus. And this agreement would mark a serious escalation of Russian capabilities in the Mediterranean, as the bases would serve as a launching ground for Russian air and naval missions throughout the region. So we're seeing different things occur in these areas around the Mediterranean, around Syria, around Iran, around China. Everything is being put into place. Now, over in Egypt, they're having a little bit of rioting. Morsi supporters are holding fresh rallies across Egypt. Tens of thousands of supporters of the overthrown president Morsi have staged fresh rallies across Egypt to demand his reinstatement. Now, again, it looks like the U.S. is trying to maintain the government in Egypt, to maintain the dollar as the reserve currency and the central bank. And again, the U.S. does have troops ready to go in if things get out of hand. And the government, the U.S. government and central bankers will approve who gets put into office. Right now they have the same puppet government that is controlled by the U.S. government central bankers still there. So everything is okay. And they don't care if people are doing a little bit of rioting or protesting, as long as the dollar and the central bank is not touched. Now, in India, they are creating a strike force, and it would allow war on two fronts. The Indian government this week reportedly paved the way for this creation of a new military corps of 50,000 troops near its border with China. Analysts say this is a sign that New Delhi, which has been largely focused on its frontier with Pakistan, is now shifting its attention to the long-disputed Sino-Indian boundary. And this strike corps would give India thousands of war-ready soldiers trained and equipped to respond rapidly to a military threat stationed close to the border between India and China, known as the Line of Actual Control. And they're saying that the process will be incremental, and they're saying that there's no reason to beef up the soldiers all at once because there's no immediate threat. But if they needed to, they could ramp it up, and the soldiers will be ready and trained in this type of area that they're building. And we can see that all of these countries are starting to move and put their assets in place. Now, Turkey is beefing up their military presence near the Syrian border. Turkey has deployed military units along its border with Syria following clashes between a Syrian Kurdish armed party and Al-Qaeda linked to al-Nusra Front, and you can tell that something is happening in the Syrian area. The Syrian armed forces have taken control of Aleppo's al-Rashidin district, and the paid U.S. government mercenaries are losing control of the war, and they're losing territory. And now we have one of the rebels visiting the United States, to meet with representatives, and we are getting ready for something to happen soon because they need to get this war started. So far, the rebels are losing, the Syrian armed forces are gaining ground, and the U.S. is backed against the wall. Now, the Pentagon and the Obama administration are still using the case of chemical weapons, and the Pentagon says that 75,000 troops might be needed to seize the Syrian chemical arms. And this goes on to say the Pentagon has told the Obama administration that any military effort to seize Syria's stockpiles of chemical weapons would require up to 75,000 troops to put into Syria. And we can tell here that something is going to occur. And, they crossed the red line, and Obama, told the American people that if they cross the red line, he will take action and support the rebels in any way that he can. And the war is not going well. So here we are. Now, how is he going to get these troops into Syria? Well, one way is a false flag event. Kill Americans, make it bloody, horrific, and prove his point. The administration could prove their point of, see, this is why we have to go in there, and the American and Congress will beg for it, because right now America and Congress they want nothing to do with going into Syria at this point. There was surveys done, and around 70% or so saying that we shouldn't even be in Syria, let them handle their own problems. Now, on the other hand, Obama could, just like he always does with everything else, ignore any laws and just tell the troops to go in. And he can make this up as, this is not a war, this is just a temporary thing, and which turns into a long-term thing, and this is how they avoid all the laws. And to me, if you're sending troops into anywhere to help fighting against another government, that's war. And I like all the terms that they put on this. It's not war, it's kinetic action, it's this, it's that. It's war. And the only division of the government that can declare war is Congress. But we'll see how this plays out. And I don't know if it's very difficult to say which approach they're going to take, but we should always be prepared and look out for some type of event and be aware that something could happen. But they are prepping for something. And you can tell by all the other countries getting ready and understanding what is going on. Okay, let's move on here. Now, in Chicago, to fight the problem with guns in Chicago, because they have the strictest gun laws, and it's a gun-free zone, except for all the criminals. I mean, all the citizens have no guns, but all the criminals do. So they came up with this incredible idea to help with this problem. And the Chicago police are going to hand-deliver letters to people suspected of committing or being victims of gun crimes in an effort to stem violence in the city. Starting Friday, a district commander will be delivering letters warning certain targets in that district not to commit violent crimes. They're going to put those guys on notice. And we're just letting them know we know who you are and we know what you do. Are you kidding me? You're giving a letter to a criminal, to someone who doesn't abide by the law and goes out and commits crimes with guns. And you're going to tell them you know who they are? This is ridiculous. They give a shit. Again, people who are committing crimes, who are murdering people or shooting at other people or robbing stores, they don't care about any of the laws. They don't care about the laws. Why are they going to care about this letter? Makes no sense to me. Now, there was an interesting article that says filibuster agreement means Obama and Reid can push gun control through the Senate. Now, the Republican leadership in the Senate shook hands with the devil and came to an agreement in order for Barack Obama to push through his radical nominees, among them new Labor Secretary Thomas Perez and the new head of the EPA, Gina McCarthy. However, keep in mind that this agreement may just be applied to gun control. And this goes on to say, if the Senate's filibuster rules are removed completely, expect any and all gun control legislation to pass, including the Toomey-Manchin Amendment, with universal gun registries and possibly even ratification of the United Nations Small Arms Treaty, which Barack Obama has said he will sign quietly when the Congress is not in session. So they are looking to bypass everything just to get these laws passed. And this has nothing to do with the people, because if it did, he wouldn't do this when the Congress is not in session and do it quietly. Again, this is the last part that they need to do. They need to get the gun bill and the UN Arms Treaty signed. They need it to be put into law. Now, again, they can do this in one or two ways. They can make backroom deals and just push it through quietly without really, just like they did with the NDAA, like the Patriot Act, all these different laws that they always did, like Obamacare. Don't read it. You got to approve it first, then you can read it. And now they're realizing, holy crap, look what we have. But this gun confiscation or limiting of your weapons needs to be done before the collapse. They don't care how it's done. They don't care how they get there. And they know they are running out of time. So either they're going to use the method I just mentioned, or they're going to use a false flag and create a situation where there is mass shootings and it's bloody, horrific, and the gun control people rise up again and say, let's pass this. Again, this is why all these bills are pending in the Senate, because they are waiting for something to happen to have these passed. Okay, let's move on here. Now, there was an interesting story saying that developing top NSA and Department of Justice officials have fled the U.S. Obama administration files espionage charges on these people who were testifying in the case with Edward Snowden and the NSA. And this goes on to say, in a stunning development, Deputy Director of the NSA, John Inglis, along with Assistant Attorney General James Cole, have fled the United States after their participation in the congressional meeting on Capitol Hill, and now labeled as spies. And they go on to say, the national security of the United States has been damaged by those leaks. The safety of the American people and the safety of people in allied nations are at risk. I'm confident that the people who are responsible will be held accountable. And they always go on to say that the American people and their safety are always at risk. But let's back up here for a second. The Obama administration and the government are the ones who violated the Fourth Amendment. They took oaths to support and protect the Constitution, and the Fourth Amendment was violated, and they have no problem ignoring this, and they are going after those people who are reporting that they were spying. It doesn't even make sense anymore. It's mind-boggling. These people who are telling the American people that the government is spying on you, these are the patriots of the country because they see what's going on. And let me just read to you what a patriot is. And Mark Twain wrote this. In the beginning of a change, the patriot is a scarce man, and brave and hated and scorned. When his cause succeeds, The timid join him, for then it costs nothing to be a patriot. These people are patriots. Yes, most of America are who are sleeping, not aware of what's going on, are calling them traitors. They're scorned. But really, as time goes on, these people will be seen as heroes. And this is what always happens. Okay, let's move on here. Now, DHS warning, Big Brother could be about to get much bigger. And the reason why I'm saying this is that Janet Napolitano used to be head of the DHS, and now they're looking for the replacement. And it looks like that Kelly, the commissioner of New York City Police, Ray Kelly, could be taken over that position. And just to understand what Kelly has done in New York, we need to go over this. Kelly is the man behind New York City's Brutish Stop and Frisk program, according to New York State legislators. Kelly defends the programs that he created, and they are designed to instill fear in the people. 2. Kelly has helped oversee a collusion between law enforcement and tech companies for the creation of an unparalleled surveillance regime in New York City. And this is to allow law enforcement to better collect data and review the city in real time using a collection of cameras, license plate readers, and other resources. 3. Kelly forged an unprecedented and possibly illegal program allowing the Central Intelligence Agency to embed itself in the NYPD for the purpose of domestic surveillance. 4. Kelly created a program to target New York's Muslim community for mass surveillance. 5. Kelly insists that law enforcement authorities should be shielded from independent public oversight. Yes, that's right. When confronted with a proposal to follow other cities and create an independent police monitor, Kelly blowtorched the proposal. Consider his record, and then consider it backed by the resources of not just New York City, but the entire Federal Department of Homeland Security. He will take DHS to the next level. And we saw this in Germany when we first had the brown shirts, and then it turned into the Gestapo. We are going to see this as, if he's appointed as head of DHS, this will take on a whole new face, and it will be prepare DHS for the coming collapse. Okay, let me just talk about President Barack Obama's complete list of historic firsts. The first president to violate the War Powers Act. The first president to triple the number of warrantless wiretaps of U.S. citizens. The first president to sign into law a bill that permits the government to hold anyone suspected of being associated with terrorism indefinitely, with no due process, no indictment, no judge or jury, no evidence, no trial, just jail. And that is the NDAA. The first president to refuse to tell the public what he did for 8 hours after being informed that a U.S. ambassador was facing imminent death during a terror attack. The first president to lie about the reason for an ambassador's death, blaming it on an internet video rather than what he knew to be the case. First president to have an innocent filmmaker thrown in jail after lying about the cause for a deadly attack on U.S. diplomats, using the filmmaker as a scapegoat. The first president to use the IRS to unfairly target political enemies. The first president to unlawfully seize telephone records of more than 100 reporters to intimidate and bully them. The first president to witness a single cabinet secretary commit multiple Hatch Act violations without acting, speaking out, disciplining, or firing that person. The first president to have his attorney general held in criminal contempt of Congress for his efforts to cover up Operation Fast and Furious that killed over 300 individuals. First president to claim executive privilege to shield a sitting attorney general from contempt of Congress fighting for perjury and withholding evidence from lawful subpoenas. The first president to issue unlawful recess appointments over a long weekend while the U.S. Senate remained in session. The first president to fire an inspector general of AmeriCorps for catching one of his friends in a corruption case. The first president to order a secretary amnesty program that stopped the deportation of illegal immigrants across the U.S., including those with criminal convictions. The first president to sue states for enforcing voter ID requirements, which were previously ruled legal by the U.S. Supreme Court. The first president to encourage racial discrimination and intimidation at polling places. First president to refuse to comply with White House Oversight Committee subpoena. First president to arbitrarily declare an existing law unconstitutional and refuse to enforce it. And that is the Defense of Marriage Act. First president to increase surveillance of American citizens under the Patriot Act by 1,000% in 4 years. The first president to demand a company hand over $20 billion to one of his political appointees, BP Oil Spill Relief Fund. First president to have a law signed by an auto pen without being present. So these are all the different things, some of them, that he has done. Now, I do believe that a part one of the collapse is coming this fall. I believe that the Fed right now is the total and complete market of the Treasury bond, stock market, housing, and student loan. And the bond bubble is blowing up big time, and the Fed knows it. And they were litmus testing to see what would happen if they just mentioned the word taper, and they got their answer that the markets will take a dive. And they know that this is an inevitability, and they know that this is going to happen. But they need to kick the can down the street a little bit longer. So they will do something in the fall, and there was this article, and I'll read part of it to you. If they maintain the current program, the Fed will gobble up more than 100% of net issuance by December. In other words, the Fed has become both the indiscriminate buyer and the only buyer. If there is one thing economists learn at university, it is simple fact that the price is set at the margin. But what happens when the single buyer becomes the entire market, all the way up to the margin? Well, at this point, the market price is fully dependent on the single buyer. The main difference between QE and the previous programs is simply that the Fed has become the market. So when the Fed hints about tapering, the front-running holders of already issued TSY jump the ship and overwhelm the Fed program. Prices drop, yield spikes, and the stock market is getting an additional boost as bond sellers park their cash in the S&P bubble. And we see that right now. The S&P and the Dow are making all-time highs. So what does this mean? The multi-bubble machine called the Fed is at it again. This time they managed to create a gigantic bond bubble which will dwarf both the dot-com and the housing bubble combined, and they know this, but they need more time. So they will let things go for part one of the collapse, and things will fall apart in the fall, but they will pump it back up as best they can before the main one hits in the spring. And I do believe we're going to see this, and this is why when you see all the reports of Kerry coming out saying that they will have the gun legislation signed by August, all the troops, the Obama administration pushing to invade Syria to get the war started, all this surveillance going on. They have everything in place except for a couple of things: the war getting started and the gun legislation. They've already set up the executive order for the control of the internet and communications, and all they need is CISPA passed. So when Part 1 comes, we will see bail-ins, we will see a cyber attacks at this point to push CISPA through, and they will do all of this leading up to and during the fall time period to get everything prepared for the major collapse. Now, people are going to lose a lot of money during this time. People are going to lose a lot of jobs. It's going to be like 2008, and people will be suffering because there'll be nothing that the government really could give them at this time, and they will pump it up, and it'll be like a dead cat bounce, just like we saw in the Great Depression, where the market started to come back up, and in 1932, boom, it completely crashed. But we're going to see this sooner because this is unprecedented with the printing of money, the Fed being in every single market, and we're just going to see the entire thing collapse. And also, let me just say, when the Fed, was going to taper, a lot of people got out. A lot of the people who know what's coming are getting out, and this is why you saw the slam dunk of the precious metals, because they are all preparing themselves for what lies ahead. Listen, everyone, have a great weekend. I will be doing a news brief on Saturday. Be well, be safe, and especially be prepared. Thanks a lot.